idea in my head, and then I understand it's not gonna work. So for example, I explained something at the last lesson, and we all felt like we understood it, but then they come for the next lesson and oh my God, they've forgotten everything, they don't understand anything, and I have to explain, I have to do, maybe I did my job well, maybe it's just, it happens, it takes time, you have to be patient, whatever the reasons are, but I have to be flexible, I have to be ready to change my plan. So, at this initial stage of the lesson, when I'm speaking with my students, trying to understand how they feel and how ready they are for the lesson, somebody has to be ready to change. Because it doesn't happen very often that you have harmony right from the start. That the students are ready, they've done their homework and what you have planned, and you can merge these things and work towards the goal that you initially set for yourself, for the group, for the lesson. So somebody has to change. It's either them, so they have to do the work. They were not initially expecting to work, but now they have to, and you have to make them do that, and they have to change. Or it's again you changing your plan and doing something different. But again, you ask them to talk, you listen to them, you feel how ready they are and how viable the lesson plan is, how successful it's going to be. And when you have understood what you want to do, what you have to do at the lesson, well, that's why I actually don't spend too much time preparing for lessons. I just have different materials that I know I could do depending on what kind of vibes my students are going to send me at the beginning. I may go this way, I may go that way. So I practically, all the time I improvise. I feel them, and then I decide on the spur of the moment, okay, I'll do this grammar. Or, no, we'll practice that again. Especially I have to do that when I see that they haven't done their homework. That's one of the most disastrous things that students can do to the lesson. They can ruin it by not doing their homework. And if you care enough about the homework, you have to somehow work with the material that they were supposed to learn at home, but they didn't, and you hate to see this material wasted. So you bring it up, no new topic, nothing new, just once again, let's do the text, let's work with this vocabulary, let's practice this grammar, because I see you don't know it. I want you to know it very well, but you don't, guys, come on, let's do it again. And then you set the same homework for the next lesson. So, and then maybe you start the new material, maybe not. So, a lesson has to be flexible. On the one hand, you have to understand what you want and be ready to accomplish it. On the other hand, stay flexible, improvise, feel your students, make the decisions about what is right, what is wrong. And that's why I don't like course books, because course books are for, well, I understand that good teachers, they take textbooks and they always modify the material, they present it in a different way to their students in their classes, just to suit their students' needs. I understand, but still, well, I don't know. I don't like the idea of having the same dish served to millions of students. I don't believe in that. I believe in different tastes and different physical abilities, constitution of people, and they're not ready to accept it. Anyway, so, well, where was I? Yeah, you establish the connection at the beginning of the lesson. You make the decision which way your lesson is going to go. And again, it's very general things. I'm not giving you any techniques. Later at later seminars, I will share them with you, some of them. But what you could do after this introduction, how are you guys? Tell me. What you could do is you can do warm-up, of course. It's classic to do warm-up, which is a short, fast, funny, energetic, easy activity. Fun activity may be the one that involves communication. Some activity that just gets the class going, sets the right mood. It can be just a payroll discussion, it can be a simple game, but it should be something really easy to explain, something really easy to understand and to do, that doesn't require too much reading, thinking. It should be something that just gets them doing things. Well, I don't know, the easiest warm-ups I've ever done, just, and the one that you can come up with on the spur of the moment, just quickly give, you have 6 people, you give every one of them a phrase that you've been learning recently, and ask them to write it down on a separate sheet of paper, which you quickly you take a big sheet of paper, tear it up into small pieces and distribute it among the students, and they write the keyword or phrase that you've been learning on their sheet of paper. And then they write the translation on the other side of the slip of paper. Again, it's something that you could have done when preparing for the lesson, but just imagine that you were not planning this, and you understand that the warm-up that you have prepared is not going to work, so it's meaningless. So you instantly come up with this idea. Okay, quickly, you have a slip of paper, everyone has a slip of paper. On the one part you write an English phrase, and the other part you write the Russian phrase, and you make sure that everything they've written is correct. And then you get them to stand up, move around the class, and so 2 people meet while standing or walking around the class. 2 people meet, one of them shows the slip of paper that they have and shows the Russian version, and the person looks at it and says it in English. For example, yeah, and if the answer is correct, well, I say, oh, good, and we swap. I mean, he has translated my sentence or phrase, I have translated his or hers, and we swap our pieces of paper. And my task is to remember the phrases that are in the classroom. So I move around, I translate the phrases, I swap the pieces of paper, and the task is, I say, guys, the first person to know all the 6 phrases says bingo, and he has a prize, whatever the prize is. I sometimes promise my children, my teenagers that I teach, like some chocolate, and the next lesson I give them chocolate, or sometimes just nothing, and good boy, girl, thank you, sit down. But very simple warm-up activity. But it is, it is short, easy. If you prepare it, of course, it'll be even easier to do. And it gets them moving, gets them thinking, it just gets them working. So this is what warm-up is all about, and there are hundreds of them. So if you just start teaching and start just thinking, okay, I have a warm-up to do, what am I gonna do, what kind of warm-up? And just experiment, do this activity at the beginning, do that activity, and see what works, what doesn't work. Because, again, people are different, and different activities will work for different groups in different ways. So that's why don't be afraid to take risks. So you do this warm-up, and one more thing, the warm-up can be just for the sake of fun, just let's have fun, or it can include the language that we have been studying, the way we want to revise, or even the language that we're going to study. So it can be with some language input or a language practice. It can contain, but it doesn't have to, really. And yeah, of course, at the beginning of the lesson, what you can do is you can check their homework. And here, one of the most important things when checking their homework is don't waste time. I mean, it's not always reasonable to get Vasya to read the first sentence, and then the class is sitting and waiting and maybe commenting, yes, correct, not incorrect. So then Luda, then Oleg, and everyone. So don't waste time, please. Check homework as a class. if it's really necessary. If you cannot do it at home by yourself, or if you cannot give your students the correct answers, which I always do, I just give them the sound with the correct answers, and I ask them to listen to the correct answers at home, and if they have questions they can ask me. Or I can briefly just, I don't know, say this, translate this, answer this question, and I actually, what I do, I ask my students, well, and I test them. I want to see whether they know the homework, when they've done it or not, but just somebody, and maybe only some language, not everything. So it takes, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes, and it gives me a picture of where the class is in that material. But sometimes when this topic is hard, when it's really hard to understand, and there is a very high risk of them making mistakes, and a high risk of having a mess in my students' head, so it's okay to just, guys, okay, let's check the homework. And you check every sentence, you explain every word that they want to be explained and everything, and so you just study it in a school way. Because the topic is so difficult, because everyone wants to be sure that they understand it in the right way. So to give them this confidence, that this clarity, this cleanness in their head, well, it's sometimes does to sacrifice a big chunk of the lesson. But again, be careful, and if you understand that you don't have to do that, it can easily be done another way, just to save time. The precious classroom time, just avoid it. Don't do it, just go right through to the next round. Or alternatively, what you could do is, instead of checking whether they know the vocabulary that you wanted them to learn, you can, and it's something that is very hard, I think, to improvise, to come up with on the spur of the moment, to improvise on, it's something that you should prepare at home. Anyway, you can design a special communicative activity, maybe some questions, answers, some dialogues, something to get them to work in pairs, and this new activity will incorporate the language that you wanted them to learn. And as they're doing this activity, on the one hand, you will always be able to see whether they know it or not, how easy for them it is to communicate, to perform this task. On the other hand, it will give them this extra exposure to the language that they're learning. And again, it's hard for me to give me a good example of this type of activity. Let me just give you the basic rule. Do not check the homework, but do an interesting communicative activity that includes the material that you want them to practice, or maybe you want just to test them to see whether they know it or not. Just again, not to waste the precious classroom time. And I don't know, it can be, homework check can be done before the warm-up, instead of the warm-up, after the warm-up, depending, sometimes at the end of the lesson. So I don't believe that there are strict rules. I believe in improvisation and in your feeling of what is right, what is wrong in this particular situation. So you don't have to do it at the beginning. Sometimes you don't have to do it at all, though I know that students are motivated when you check their homework. If you don't, you demotivate them. Please. Well, I make this mistake, unfortunately. Sometimes I forget, sometimes there are other reasons. I hope it doesn't happen very often, but I do sometimes fail to check my students' homework. And this doesn't make me a very good teacher. I know that. I'm sorry. I'm a human being. Errare humanum est. But still, I know that this is the way things are meant to be. You should check their homework. And this is the standard, and that's why I encourage myself to always do that. And then that. So, kind of introduction, feeling the group, homework check, warm up. It's all somewhere at the beginning of the lesson, and may take up to 30 minutes, depending on many factors. What else? After that, for example, you want to start a new topic, to teach them some new material. And what you do is you make a presentation of the material. And there are different ways to present the material. I do it in a straightforward way. I just say, guys, today new grammar, this is what we are learning, listen to me, here's what it means and everything. I do it in a straightforward school way. And I just make sure that my students are focused on what I'm saying, that they understand what they're learning, why they're learning it. And I make sure that they are motivated, that they have the energy. And that's why I don't have to decorate it in this communicative approach way and say, rather than saying, guys, because this is what teaching communicative approach teaches us, that you should not teach grammar, you should not teach vocabulary, you should teach certain skills, like you should present the language in this way. Guys, today we're going to learn to talk about what we have in our rooms or in our flats, in our houses, where we live. So we are going to learn to talk about these things, well, because sometimes we have to buy or sell or rent or let the real estate. Yeah. So we have to do it as part of our lives, and that's why we're going to learn to describe what we have inside. And this is not bad, this is pretty good, I like it, and maybe I would like to encourage you to do that. To start a presentation not with words, guys, today, grammar, though I like it, and because I see that it motivates my students. But say, guys, today we're going to choose the hotel that we're going to spend our summer in. And this is what the lesson was all about, learning some information about different hotels, engaging my students in different activities, helping them, getting them to deal with certain language that describes hotels. And at the end, after 5-7 different exercises and activities, I see, they can describe, they can compare, they can do things, they can achieve a communicative goal, they can communicate using certain vocabulary. And so this is something you should start with, your presentation with. And you can say, like, guys, today we're going to learn this, and here is the text about the person, or here is the text about, or here's a dialogue between two people. One of them is going on a holiday and trying to figure out where to go and everything like this. So you start with the communicative goal of the lesson, and you give them a communicative task, you give them a context. You, right from the beginning of your presentation, you set the context. So the topic should be life topic, about food, about job, about family, not about grammar, vocabulary. But this is ideal that I often, well, actually most of the time, don't follow. But you should. You should. And the next step of the presentation, you give them this context, you give them the dialogue